We are in Judges chapter 1. Judges is an interesting book. Nobody really knows who wrote it. It's believed that it was written, or it's at least accredited to in the Jewish tradition, which we are not Jews, but accredited by the Jews to Samuel, the prophet Samuel. And the total accreditation of biblical books, canonical texts to Samuel is Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, Kings, and Joshua. So Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, Kings. So believed to be all written by 1 Kings, 2 Kings, yada, yada, yada. Believed to all be written by the prophet Samuel. And so when we begin Judges, there's a recap of what had happened at the end of Joshua. And so there is a little bit of overlap. And so there's this period of time kind of bridges the gap between the conquest of Joshua and then these judges or these worldly rulers of Israel during the time of Samuel. There's an overarching theme in Judges, and we're going to see this played out over and over and over again. There's 6 major judges and 6 minor judges for 12 total. Interesting number that plays out here with Israel in the Promised Land. The overarching theme is Israel becomes dependent upon a man, forgets to do the commands of Yah, or is in open rebellion against the commands of Yah, and the Father's blessing falls off, and they suffer astronomically because of it. They will literally go to war with one another at some point in this book. And boy, if this isn't illustrative for us. So the cool thing is, this is the 7th book in the Bible, and it means that in the Old Testament, if you've been reading along at home with us, or if you're new here, there's a massive playlist. There's 3 massive playlists here on YouTube. You can just click over to the playlist tab. One is Old Testament, one is New Testament, and one is just the Bible. It's all of it together. So it means that we've now read 252 pages of the Old Testament together out of the scriptures. And the last thing I'm going to say before we start Judges is this is the scriptures. You can get this at ISR, India Sierra Romeo Messianic.org. You can also get this at bearindependent.com in the store at our cost. If you need one of these and you don't have one, just email us ntxmag@gmail.com, ntxmag@gmail.com. Put in the subject line scriptures. I do not need to know why it is that you can't afford a Bible. I don't care. And I say that in love. I don't care. There's no good reason or bad reason. I just want to be able to send you, we just want to be able to send you a copy of these scriptures for you at no cost. So if you need a copy, please just let us know and we will make that happen. And I have a video here on YouTube called Bear's Bible for Torah Study, explaining why I use the scriptures. So I would, of the 13 different translations that I have it, I would encourage you to watch that video if you would like an explanation as to why I use this one daily. and I use the remainder for reference rather than daily study. All right, so judges, the shofetim, because shofet, it means judge, and so shofetim means judges. I am very likely mispronouncing that word because A, I'm a white guy, B, I don't know Hebrew, and C, I'm not saying it as if I have a sinus infection. That's the prerequisite to speaking Hebrew appropriately. 1, Judges 1, and it came to be after the death of Joshua that the children of Israel asked Yahweh, the Lord your God, saying, who of us should go up first against the Canaanites to fight against them? Remember the Canaanites, they're in the land of Canaan, the promised land, and there's still a bunch of people in there that the Father has told them, y'all don't need to be hanging out with these people. They're an abomination. You need to put them under the ban. Kill them completely. If you do not, they are so bad that their badness will infect you, and their badness will override your goodness, and you will not continue in my ways. Newsflash, he was correct. So, and Yahweh said, Yehuda, Judah, the tribe of, does go up, and see, I have given the land into his hand. Judah being one of the sons of Israel / Jacob, thus a tribe named after him. Judah was the largest tribe, the strongest tribe, the tribe of kings. It's a big tribe. It's like, all right, hey, who are we going to send? Send Judah. It's like, do we want to send, the National Guard or the Army? Well, there's a lot more people. Is there a lot more people in the Army? They're professional soldiers anyway. Send Judah, right? So that's what's happening here. And Judah said to Simeon, his brother, come up with me into my allotment, and let us fight against the Canaanites. And I myself shall go with you into your allotment. So Simeon went with him. And Judah went up, and Yahweh gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand. And they struck 10,000 men at Bezek. And they found Adoni-Bezek in Bezek. And they fought against him and struck the Canaanites and the Perizzites. But Adoni-Bezek fled, and they pursued him and caught him and cut off his thumbs and his big toes. He was either a prince or a king, somewhere in there. And they cut off his thumbs and his big toes. And Adoni-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to gather food under my table. As I have done, so Elohim has repaid me. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. There's a little eye for an eye, tooth for tooth going on here. This guy thought he was hot stuff, and we don't know, at least I don't know, and there's varying traditions on this, as to whether the 70 kings ate food under my table. If that's literal, if that means that he literally had a table where he had 70 humbled kings that sat underneath the table and would eat the scraps that fell off of his table, and he had humbled them by cutting off their big toes and their thumbs. Well, what separates man, other than our intellect and our relationship with Yah, from every other living being on the face of the earth? We have opposable thumbs. Cut your thumbs off, both of them, you're severely humbled. And what do your big toes do? They aid greatly in balance. I mean, talk about being humbled, but fumbled is a good word. So we don't know if he literally had them underneath his table eating food scraps, or if it was a turn of phrase, meaning that they were so dependent upon him for the food that came into their mouths that they were under his table. But either way, he realizes that he is repaid in like kind for the bad stuff that he did to others. And clearly, it stuck enough with the children of Israel that they went out of their way to make sure to cut his toes off and his thumbs off. And then they delivered to him Jerusalem, and he died there. So that's just an eye for an eye playing out right there, hardcore. And it does prove the point, vengeance is mine, so saith the Lord. Amen. he uses subcontractors for most instances of vengeance being meted out. And the children of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it, and struck it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. Why? Because it wasn't theirs yet. We think of Jerusalem as being the quintessential Hebrew city. Well, it hadn't become theirs yet. And afterwards, the children of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites who dwelt in the mountains, in the south and in the low country. And Judah went against the Canaanites who dwelt in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arba. And they struck Sheshai and Abiman and Talmai. And from there they went against the inhabitants of Debir. Now the name of Debir was formerly Kiriath Sefer. And Caleb, now we get the indication here now. Remember Caleb, our 85-year-old badass who's out there literally just swinging axes and making stuff happen? Caleb was along for the ride. And so remember that there's some overlap here between the end of the book of Joshua and the beginning of the book of Judges. And so Caleb is still literally and figuratively on the battlefield. And Caleb said, "He who smites Kiriath Sefer and captures it, to him I shall give my daughter Achsah as wife." And Othniel, son of Kenaz, who we will see more later in the book of Judges, Caleb's younger brother, captured it, and he gave him his daughter Achsah as his wife. And it came to be when she came in that she urged him to ask her father for a field. And when she got off from her donkey, Caleb said to her, "What is the matter?" She said to him, "Give me a blessing. Since you have given me land in the south, give me also springs of water." And so Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. Place to water her animals, their animals. And the children of Canaanite, father-in-law of Moses, went up from the city of Palms with the children of Judah into the wilderness of Judah, which is in the Negev of Arad. And they went and dwelt among the people. And Judah went with Simeon his brother, and they struck the Canaanites who inhabited Sephath, and they put it under the band. And so the city, the name of the city was called Hormah. And Judah captured Azah and its border, and Ashkelon and its border, and Ekron and its border. And Yahweh was with Judah. So they took possession of the mountains, but they were unable to drive out the inhabitants of the plain, because they had chariots of iron. And they gave Hebron to Caleb, as Moshe had said, and he drove out from there 3 sons of Anak. Now I realize I've hit this Caleb thing over and over again, but for those who are new here or those who just need a reminder, Caleb was 85 years old at this point, and when he asks Joshua for Hebron, he says, "Hey, I want Hebron as an inheritance," Joshua says, "Dude, you're 85 years old." And Caleb says, "I was 40 years old when Moshe tapped me on the shoulder to go in with you as a spy into the promised land. And then the promised land was rejected by our people. Then we wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Then we get back to the promised land. I'm 80 now. Oh, and then we're in 5 years of open warfare throughout the plain. Now he's 85. And Joshua says, "Yeah, you can have Hebron, but there's not one giant. There's 3 giants up in them hills, the sons of Anak." And Caleb's like, "Sounds good, bro. Boys, let's roll." And they go do giant murder on 3 giants at 85 years old. So, I don't know. The next time any of us has something to complain about, just think about Caleb, okay? And they gave Hebron to Caleb, as Moshe had said, and he drove out from there the 3 sons of Anak, the Anakim, the giants. However, the children of Benjamin, did not drive out the Jebusites who inhabited Jerusalem. So the Jebusites have dwelt with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. And the house of Joseph also went up against Bethel, and Yahweh was with them. And the house of Joseph sent men to spy out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. And the watchmen saw a man coming out of the city. And they said to him, "Please show us the entrance to the city, and we shall show you loving commitment." So they had some people on overwatch. They saw a dude come out of the city. They snatched him up, and they said, "Hey, you're going to show us how to get into that city, and in return, we will show you loving commitment," Meaning that when we go in there and ransack this place, you and your household, you'll be okay. This is kind of like indicative of Rahab the whore. And it shows that, at least a little bit, Israel is retaining some of the stuff that they've learned. So they did a little snatch and grab on this guy as he came out of the front door of the city. And so verse 25, so he showed them the entrance to the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword. But the man and all his clan they let go. So they kept their word there. And the man went to the land of the Hittites and built a city and called its name Luz, which is its name to this day. And Manasseh did not possess Beth Shean and its villages, nor Tanakh and its villages, nor the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, nor the inhabitants of Yibleam and its villages, nor the inhabitants of Megiddo, which is a fortress, and its villages. For the Canaanites desired to dwell in that land. And so Manasseh just wasn't getting after it. They're just kind of lukewarm. We know how well that goes for the Father's people. And it came to be, when Israel was strong, that they put the Canaanites into compulsory labor, but did not completely drive them out. They were not told to put them into compulsory labor. They were told to completely drive them out. Neither did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites who dwelt in Gezer. So the Canaanites dwelt in the midst in Gezer. Neither did Zebulun drive out the inhabitants of Kitron, or the inhabitants of Nahalal. So the Canaanites dwelt in their midst and became compulsory labor. Neither did Asher. And the point here is that every one of these tribes had some type of transgression here against the command of Yah, even as they're getting set up in the promised land. Neither did Asher drive out the inhabitants of Akko, nor the inhabitants of Sidon, nor Elab, nor Akzib, nor Helba, nor Afnik, nor Rehob. So the Asherites dwelt in the midst of the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, because they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, nor the inhabitants of Beth Anath, but they dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, and the inhabitants of Beth Shemeth and Beth Anath became compulsory labor for them. And the Amorites pressed the children of Dan into the mountains. So not only did Dan not drive out the Amorites put Dan on the hoof and ran Dan up into the mountains, for they would not allow them to come down out of the valley. And the Amorites desired to dwell in Mount Herez, in Ayalon, in Shalabim. But when the hand of the house of Joseph became stronger, they became compulsory labor. And the border of the Amorites was from the ascent of Arakbim, from Salah and upward. Akrabim, rather. So these guys were told, hey, go in there, do your job. Root out all of this evil. Sounds good. But they didn't. Think about, like, just talking about this yesterday. Ramadi, 2005, 2006 time frame. Door to door. Block to block. Street to street. It's messy. It's hard. It's difficult. There's a lot of collateral damage. Unfortunately, people get killed. It's not easy. But if you don't go through and not only root out the evil and destroy it, but then take possession of the land and hold it, it doesn't work. Israel thought they knew what they were doing, and they didn't. They left literal insurgents in their midst. And not only were these insurgents pissed at them, but they started tainting the relationship between Israel and Yah. And we're going to see that over and over again in the book of Judges. I guess we'll do Judges 2 as well. And the messenger of Yahuwah, capital M, messenger, an angel of the Lord. This is me speaking. I think this is Yeshua. And the messenger of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I led you up. It's the same messenger that led them out of Mitzrayim, which is Yeshua. There's a lot. Go back and read Exodus, either for yourself or with us on the playlist here. Yeshua shows up a lot with like doing a lot of leadership and murder on behalf of the children of Israel. There's some people who get smoked. And that's why, one of the many reasons why it drives me crazy when people are like, my loving Jesus would never do that to me. You better read your freaking Bible. Just saying. You better read your Bible. And the messenger of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I led you up from Mitzrayim and brought you to the land of which I swore to your fathers. And I said, I do not break my covenant with you. And as for you, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land. What is a covenant? It's an agreement between two or more parties. So the Father himself manifested in the form of Yeshua here on earth comes to the children of Israel, leads them out of Mitzrayim and says, hey, I'm not breaking my covenant with you, which is a backhanded reminder of, bro, we're in covenant. Hey, I haven't broke my covenant with you. As for you, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land, all those inhabitants that they left in their midst. Break down their slaughter places, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? Therefore I also said, I am not driving them out before you, and they shall be adversaries to you, and their mighty ones shall be a snare to you. He said, hey, I will put them into your hand. If you will go do battle with them, you will win. They didn't. And so now they're being told, hey, I'm withdrawing that from you. You were given, this door was open to you, and I told you if you would walk through it, I would bless it. You got 1 foot through the door, 1 foot in the hallway. I told you to do this thing. You didn't do it. Now I'm closing that door. Therefore I also said, I'm not driving them out before you, and they shall be adversaries to you, and their mighty ones shall be a snare to you. And it came to be when the messenger of Yahweh spoke these words to all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voice and wept. You think? So they called the name of that place Bochim, and slaughtered there to Yahweh. Then Joshua dismissed it. Well, wait a minute. I thought Joshua was dead. He is dead. But there is overlap, again, between the end of Joshua and the beginning of Judges, which is a contributing factor to the theory that the prophet Samuel is the one that wrote all these books, as previously discussed. Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, Kings, and some other book. I can't remember right now. But I told you, don't worry, I told you 20 minutes ago. You wrote that down, right? Good, because now my brain doesn't work. So then Joshua dismissed the people, and the children of Israel went each to his own inheritance to possess the land. And the people served Yahweh all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of Yahweh which had been done for Israel. And Yehoshua, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of Yahweh, died 110 years old. And they buried him within the border of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres, in the mountains of Ephraim, on the north side of Mount Gaash. And all that generation were likewise gathered to their fathers. They all died. And another generation arose after them, who did not know Yahweh, nor the work which he had done for Israel. What's that? Bad times make hard men make good times make weak men make bad times make hard men make good times. That cycle started to play out. For there was an entire generation that did not know Yahweh face to face, that did not see the Red Sea open and then see it consume Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, that had not seen literal giant murder on behalf of the Israelites. People going, there's no way we can do that. Pfft, watch this, sucker. That did not understand the provision and blessing, that didn't hear Moses in Deuteronomy 32, Moses' voice saying, remember this, I give you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you'll keep the commands of Yahweh, and a curse if you won't. And I call heaven and earth to witness against you. Right? And the re-giving of the law, the retelling in Deuteronomy, they missed all of that. They have, at best, secondhand information, but they haven't lived it, they haven't experienced it. And this is why we've been told over and over again in the Word to guard to do the Father's commands. Because if you don't have firsthand experience in it, it doesn't mean anything to you. If it's just words on a page or a story that your grandpa told you, it's much less real than if you know it in your mind and in your heart and you do it with your hands, which is exactly the crux of the renewed covenant in Hebrews 8 verse 10. That you have the Father's laws in your mind written on your heart so that you can do it with your hands, because we are to guard to do this, and they didn't. And they suffer greatly because of it. Verse 10, 2:10. And all that generation were likewise gathered to their fathers, and another generation arose after them who did not know Yahweh, nor the work which he had done for Israel. Nor the work. What an interesting word as well. Well, that's a works-based theology. Well, gosh dang, read your freaking Bible. We need, if we ever do this assembly thing, we need a buzzer. We need a beep, because I might need one. Beep. You know what I mean? Like a little censorship button. Yeah. Hey, and I know a sound guy. Turns out they just happen to be visiting here, looking for a place to plug in at. More on that later, YouTube. What? Then the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of Yahweh and served the Baals, the false gods, and forsook Yahweh Elohim of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim, and went after other mighty ones, of the mighty ones of the people who were all around them, and they bowed down to them and provoked Yahweh. This is exactly why Yah told them to utterly destroy the inhabitants of the land of Canaan, so that you do not go whoring after their false gods. This is exactly why. He said, because you are not strong enough to keep yourselves from them, so you have to destroy them. It's like, for those that don't know, I was in a decade of apostasy, open warfare with the Father, and I blew over $1 million in 2 years on cocaine and bourbon. Cocaine is my Canaanites. Co-Canaanites. That's an interesting shirt. I don't have the self-control that if there was a pile of cocaine on that coffee table right now, I can't be around it. I have to go. Or I need to utterly destroy that from my midst. There's no gray area. It will pollute me. It will destroy me. Right? Yeah. Set it on fire, but then walk away, because essentially we just made crack, right? So we don't want to be breathing that. There's a couple other brothers in this room with me. So if you're wondering who I'm talking to, it's a couple of other brothers with me. But the point here is, there are things that are stronger than our broken human nature. Everybody has at least one of them. Some people got lots of them. And I'm telling you, a lot of these people out there who are, rather than rebuking their demons, are snuggling with them, you're laying a really terrible foundation for a relationship with the Most High. But these things that in your brokenness you cannot withstand need to be utterly destroyed from within your midst. You don't need to be anywhere near them. Either you're not near it or it's not near you. And this is why Yah told Israel, destroy Canaan, because they will pollute you. Well, here, what do we see in verse 13? Judges 2, verse 13. And they forsook Yahweh and served Baal and the Ashtaroths. Now, I'm telling you right now, Ashtaroth is Ishtar, which is pagan fertility, and Ishtar is where you get Easter from. And so if you've ever wondered what a bunny rabbit pooping eggs has to do with the resurrection of Christ, the answer is nothing. Not a damn thing. And believe me, as somebody who was born and raised in the church, it pissed me off when somebody told me that too. But I'd rather you be pissed off at me for a while and go do your own homework and learn the truth of the matter than to try and be your buddy and tell you all the things that are going to make you feel good. Because it's not about feel good, it's about doing what Yah tells us to do. And we can read, and we have read in Numbers, where it says these Asherim, which were giant carved phalluses that were used for worship by these Ashtaroths, phalluses, penises. The Father says, cut them down, utterly destroy them, and do not build a slaughter place unto Yah, a place of worship unto the Most High, anywhere near these things. And if you've ever wondered, it literally says an Asherim and an obelisk. These obelisks are everywhere. They're the same thing. They're penises. And we're told to utterly destroy them, cut them down, and do not worship them. I'm telling you, go drive down the main street of any city or any town, anywhere in the United States of America, find a church and look at it. What's on top of it? An obelisk. That's right. That steeple is an obelisk. Do your homework. It's the pollution of Baal and Ashtaroth. And see, this is false worship. They forsook Yahweh and served Baal and the Ashtaroths. And there's two things, there's a point I want to make here. But it's a multifaceted point in verse 13. Baal is the open revolt against Yah. Baal is like Satan worship. You're like, nope, I openly reject Yahweh my Elohim. Ashtaroth is subversion. Ashtaroth is the penis on the church. It's the false worship where you think you're doing what the Lord your God told you to do, but you don't know that you're doing that because you've subcontracted your faith to the whatever church has the best children's program or the best worship band, or I like the way the pastor reads the Bible the most, or their schedule really works with my schedule, or they're the closest church to my house, or they got great reviews, or whatever. You've subcontracted your faith to another human being rather than reading the Father's Word and talking to Him daily. And so you don't know what your Bible says. And if you don't know the truth of Yahweh and what He says, it's very easy, unfortunately, to find yourself in an incomplete worship and or a false worship of the Lord your God, Yahweh your Elohim, because of this Ashtaroth pagan bullcrap that has infected the church since jump. Here it is in the 7th book of the Bible, and Israel's being polluted by it in the Promised Land. And so also don't make the mistake that just because you're in the Promised Land, that there aren't wars to fight, that you don't need to guard your heart, that you don't need to pay attention to what the Father is telling you, that there aren't things that will try to destroy you in the Promised Land, because there are. The work doesn't end when you get to the Promised Land. It has just begun. And so I didn't want to skip over that or make light of that. Verse 14, and the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel. Therefore he gave them into the hands of the plunderers who despoiled them. And he sold them into the hands of the enemies all around. And they were unable to stand before their enemies any longer. Wherever they went out, the hand of Yahweh was against them for evil, as Yahweh had spoken and as Yahweh had sworn to them. And they were distressed greatly. That's kind of the end of a thought right there. So before we pick up at 16, you can flip to Hebrews 8, which is the crux of the renewed covenant between us and the Father, with Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, as mediator of that renewed covenant. And if you go to Hebrews 8 and you look at starting at verse 6, but now he, Yeshua, has obtained a more excellent service, inasmuch as he is also mediator of a better covenant, which was constituted on better promises. For if that first covenant had been found faultless, remember the Father was just talking to Israel about covenants. For if that first covenant had been found faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. We wouldn't need this renewed covenant if there wasn't a problem with the first covenant. Roger that. What was the problem with the first covenant? Literally the next verse. For finding fault with them, he says, see, the days are coming, says Yahweh, when I shall conclude with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah a renewed covenant. Who were we just talking about? The house of Israel, namely the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with them when I took their fathers out of the... Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, because they did not continue in my covenant, and I disregarded them. Because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts. The renewed covenant under Jesus the Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, is that the Father's laws are in your mind and written on your heart so that you can guard to do them. And I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And they shall by no means teach each one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, because they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. Because I shall forgive their unrighteousness, and their sins and their lawlessness I shall no longer remember. By saying renewed, he has made the first covenant old. Now what becomes old is growing aged and near disappearing, meaning that original covenant between the Father and Israel without the grace of Yeshua Messiah. Now we have the grace of Yeshua Messiah. But literally the condition of the covenant is that the Father's laws are given unto us in our mind, and then he writes them on our hearts. And then he is their Elohim and we are his people. But see, because of a lack of that, because Israel did not keep their half of the covenant, the Father disregarded them. They did not continue in his ways, and he disregarded them, which is exactly what's going on over here in Judges. And the displeasure, verse 14, the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel. Therefore he gave them into the hands of the plunderers who despoiled them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, and they were unable to stand before their enemies any longer. Wherever they went out, the hand of Yahweh was against them for evil, as Yahweh had spoken, and as Yahweh had sworn to them. He told them this was going to happen. They didn't listen, and he whipped their ass because they didn't listen. And they were greatly distressed. Then Yahweh raised up rulers who served them from the hand of those who plundered them. However, they did not listen to their rulers either, but went whoring after other mighty ones and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their fathers walked, in obeying the commands of Yahweh. They did not do so. This is why Deuteronomy 6:5 makes it clear that you should talk about the Torah constantly. When you lie down and when you stand up, you write it on your doorposts and on your gates. When you walk about the way, when you're in your house, when you're at your table, teach your kids, raise your children up in the way that they should go, and they will not depart from it when they are older. You got to make sure that it sticks, and it has to become a lifestyle. It's not a check the box kind of thing. It's why so many people, after even a short period of time of getting plugged in at a church, begin to feel spiritually empty again. They're stagnated, they're plateaued, they're stuck, because it's a couple hours a week. Well, there's 168 hours in a week. What do you do with the other 166 of them? It's a lifestyle. It's not box checker mentality. It should not be, we went to church this week, we're good. Or, yeah, I've been to church once or twice this month, we're good. Or, I don't know, yeah, I went a couple months ago. Good, I like that message. It was about love. 3 reasons you should love your neighbor. That's right. You just go ahead and drop a nice fat paycheck into that plate when it comes around. Sound good? Sound good. And by the way, we can't actually speak truth from the pulpit because I am highly dependent upon those funds that you keep dropping in the plate to run this place. Bull crap. And when Yahweh raised up rulers for them Yahweh was with the ruler and saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the ruler. For Yahweh had compassion on their groaning because of those who oppressed them and crushed them. And it came to be when the ruler was dead that they would turn back and do more corruptly than their fathers, to go after other mighty ones, to serve them and to bow down to them. This is like one step forward, two steps back. Yah raises up somebody to help them as a leader, to shine light on their transgressions and to help them walk in the way. But when that person dies, they're twice as bad as they were before that person. And so there's continuing spiraling of the drain for the children of Israel. And it came to be when the ruler was dead that they would turn back and do more corruptly than their fathers, to go after other mighty ones, to serve them and bow down to them. They did not refrain from their practices and from their stubborn way. From their stubborn way. And the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant that I commanded their fathers and has not obeyed my voice. Gosh dang, just listen to that statement. And the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant that I commanded their fathers and has not obeyed my voice, I also shall no longer drive out before any of them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, in order to try Israel by them, whether they would guard the way of Yahweh to walk in them as their fathers guarded them, or not. So Yahweh left those nations without driving them out at once, and did not give them into the hand of Joshua. You think you got this all figured out? Here's some stumbling blocks. Come see me when your legs are broken. And he's pissed. He's pissed. It is fearsome to fall into the hands of an angry Elohim. This is a theme that is recurring throughout the Word, Old Testament and New. That's why we should be thankful for the blood of Yeshua. And we should not abuse it. I have to read this verse. If you've been here before, you may have an idea of what verse I'm going to. If not, that's okay. Judgment-free zone. Hebrews 10, verse 26. For if we sin, what is sin? 1 John 3:4, transgression of the law. For if we sin purposefully, transgress the law purposefully, after we have received knowledge of the truth, just like Israel just did in Judges, there no longer remains a slaughter offering for our sins. You are no longer under the covering of the blood, but some fearsome anticipation of judgment and a fierce fire which is about to consume the opponents. Anyone who has disregarded the Torah of Moses dies without compassion on the witness of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much worse punishment do you think shall he deserve who has trampled the Son of Elohim underfoot, counted the blood of the covenant by which he was set apart as common, and insulted the Spirit of grace? For we know him who has said, vengeance is mine, I shall repay, says Yahweh. And again, Yahweh shall judge his people. It is fearsome to fall into the hands of the living Elohim. I spent a decade in apostasy, getting my ass beat by the living Elohim. And I'm thankful, really, truly thankful, that he loved me enough to beat my ass for a decade, to utterly destroy me, so that he could put me back together again. Now that I know better, if I chose to turn from this walk and do things my way, not his way, I know he would disregard me. I know he would remove his hand of provision and protection and blessing from me. I know I would be out there alone. There is nothing scarier to me than to be utterly disregarded by the creator of the universe. That is literally the definition of hell, is to be separated eternally from Yahweh. Israel put themselves in a living hell knowingly because they chose to disregard the commands of Yah. And my prayer for y'all would be that as he convicts you to do those commands, that you would do it. Because once you know, you are actively either working for him or working against him. And that in turn, you reap what you sow. He is either actively working for you or working against you. And it is a fearsome thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim. Shalom, y'all.